What's up, everybody? You're very welcome along to a special podcast, video cast, whatever it's called these days, whatever the cool kids are calling it. I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, the great and powerful Cash Boyle. Cash, how are you?
I'm alright, mate. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm enjoying the good weather, I'm not going to lie. The mood seems to lift a little bit when the sun's shining. And as you know, Ireland is a beautiful place when the sun's shining.
That's true. It's been the same more or less here in Liverpool. But I have had a lot of people saying, "Do you need sun cream?" Which is a bit harsh. But I do. I don't really take to the sun, but I like the sun, and like you say, it picks everyone up. It's nice.
As you know, I have a red-headed son and I have a red-headed wife. I'm not joking about this. It really annoys my wife that her red-headed son gets a suntan and doesn't really burn, and that she burns. That drives her mad.
I feel like I suppose you always want what you can't have, but at the same time. I've seen Sabrina. I think Sabrina would look a bit weird with it. She'd look a bit weird with a tan. I think her skin tone as it is perfect.
Yeah. So what happens is her freckles join together. That's pretty much what happens. I don't think she's alone on that one. Anyway, we shall move on and talk about the summer transfer window. So what I thought, Cash, we'd have a little chat about today was we haven't been doing too much as things stand, but I thought we could look at the business that the other top 6 clubs are doing or potentially could do. Does that sound good?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
Cool. Let's start with probably the most busy and most active club so far, and that's Manchester United. So obviously under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, so far as things stand, they've brought in Aaron Wan-Bissaka. They've brought in that young gentleman James from Swansea. Looking very likely they're going to go for Longstaff from Newcastle, and I feel maybe Harry Maguire as well. There's a bit of a to and fro there between them and Manchester City and Harry Maguire. But for you as an outsider looking at United's business, do you think, from going what Mark said, Mark always seems to believe that Wan-Bissaka, Longstaff, Harry Maguire, maybe Bruno Fernandez, and this young kid James, that would be their business. Would that be enough to get them Champions League football next season?
I suppose, the answer to that question is very contingent upon what Paul Pogba's doing, because obviously people have seen in the last hour, and we were talking about it before we went on air, he's either submitted a transfer request or his agent has definitely come out and said that he wants to leave. So a lot of that depends in terms of what happens with him. If he leaves and they take the proceeds from that sale and they have enough time to reinvest that and bring in more players, you'd argue then maybe their overall squad balance would be better, so they'd have a better chance of getting into the Champions League. But by the same token, if he leaves, you're losing your player that a lot of fans would argue is their only player with genuine star quality, maybe outside of David De Gea and Rashford on a good day. So what I would say is whether you keep Pogba or lose Pogba will impact their hopes. In terms of the business they've done so far, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer did an interview where he spoke to the press and said, "We're still working on signings." And my instinctive and immediate thought was, well, you fucking should be. Your team's dog shit. In the sense that, you're working on signings because you have not fixed all the areas in that squad that need fixing. So from a Liverpool fan perspective, I don't find their business threatening at all because they have so many flaws in their squad, far more than us. So they have to do more business than we do. If you look at the players they've brought in so far, Aaron Wan-Bissaka is a very good player. If we didn't have such a good right back, you'd want someone of that calibre. He's very good. They've paid over the odds, but defensively he's excellent, and obviously it eradicates the problem they had in that position last season. Obviously Antonio Valencia has moved on and back to Ecuador, so he fits. It's a lot of money, but they don't care. But that's a good signing for their squad. But you look at Daniel James, no guarantee that he goes straight into the lineup, and he certainly isn't someone that Liverpool wanted, so why would we care? And then obviously there's talk that they're going to sign Sean Longstaff and Harry Maguire. With all due respect, that is very Sheffield United circa 2012 championship team. It's very. Harry Maguire in particular is a very good player. I like him. Do I want him at Liverpool? No. Do I think he's better than the defenders we have? No. But is he an upgrade on what they have? Yes. But Sean Longstaff, won half a good season under the tutelage of Rafa Benitez at Newcastle, and then all of a sudden he's meant to be the man to transform Man United's midfield. I don't really think it works that way. I think with Man United, sorry to take it full circle, that was a long answer, but I wouldn't be threatened by what they're signing because it doesn't fix all the holes in their squad and it doesn't really match us man for man anyway. And in terms of their Champions League hopes, it might improve them, but ultimately we're so far above them that it doesn't even enter my thinking too much.
I've got to be really, really honest, and I always try to give my honest views on stuff. Like yourself, I think Aaron Wan-Bissaka is a very good acquisition. I'm not going to lie, I remember having conversations with people on our streams throughout the year, and they said if we ever needed to target somebody, he would be a good option potentially to come in and fight with Trent for right back. Now, as a fan, you probably don't care about the money. United fans probably couldn't care less how much they signed Aaron Wan-Bissaka for. So we'll give them that one. We'll give them a thumbs up for that sign, and I think that's fair. He will go on and he will do well for them. The two young kids are signing, Longstaff and, well, they haven't signed him yet, and James, who they have signed. It's a roll of the dice, and I think it's almost a nod to the way we've done our business, that they're trying to unearth a Harry Wilson-esque type player, or somebody who can go on and step up into the first team for cheap. Now, I don't think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is going to last the season at Manchester United. Pogba, I think they will. I think everybody wants rid of Pogba at United, if I'm being brutally honest about it. I think it's just a matter of if somebody will be foolish enough to give them 150 odd million for him or whatever they want. The big one for me that seems to have triggered a lot of Liverpool fans is Bruno Fernandez. Now, it looks very likely that he will end up at Manchester United, but here's what I've said all along, and if this sounds arrogant, sort of apologise, but if we wanted Bruno Fernandes, we would get Bruno Fernandes. That's the way I genuinely look at him and most other players in the market right now. There's one way United could possibly blow us out of the water, and that would be with wages. But if it's from a football and ambition perspective, cash, Liverpool are a better option right now than Manchester United. So I don't believe we really wanted Fernandes.
No, I mean, I think you're right. If the option was genuinely for Fernandes to be at Liverpool, he'd be here now, if you're being honest. I mean, I think if players are making it for the decision from a purely footballing basis, they'll choose Liverpool. It's like the same thing with the Harry Wilson or the Harry Maguire conundrum. If it's genuinely football that talks, and Man City and Man United go toe for toe, he'll choose City. With United, like you said at the very beginning, what they're doing now, they've essentially altered their policy. It kind of matches ours, and it's very much an acknowledgement that the last 3 or 4 years, our policy, our transfer policy, has been absolutely abysmal. And that concession of a mistake, that's music to my ears, because not only does that mean they're not as good as us now, it means that the players they're bringing in, it's with the idea of developing them into a team that could be as good as ours in years to come. It's not an immediate fix. So with Bruno Fernandes, I think he is the one player that would give them a little bit of a je ne sais quoi, a little bit of a wow factor. He's a goal-scoring midfielder. He would definitely and certainly add something to them. But arguably, while he would be great for us, I don't believe that he is the missing piece, if that makes sense. And the reality is, if the option was there for him to come, he surely would, because the difference in terms of wages that Man United and Liverpool could offer isn't as big as the gap between the quality of the teams. So if I'm a player, I'd take 20 grand a week less if I was playing in a team of Liverpool's stature, as opposed to being paid a bit more but playing for that pile of shite down the road. I mean, if you look at United in terms of, yes, they've brought in a couple of decent players potentially, but you actually look at the mass furore and the mass outcry about Juan Mata being given a new 2-year deal, option for a 3rd year, Andreas Pereira signing a new deal. People are a bit like, well, why? It doesn't really scream to me, we mean business and we're a force. Personally, I'm much more threatened by the signing of Rodri for Man City, because that's much more of a missing piece signing for me. But yeah, as far as United are concerned, I think they have so far to climb to get to our level, and they've now changed their transfer policy and strategy of doing it, so they're not a threat for at least 2 or 3 more years, I think.
There's 2 ways for me to look at the Manchester United business. As I've said, as a fan, you don't really care what the transfer fees are. You just want to know your club can afford them, and then if the player's good enough. So if they're trying to not emulate Liverpool's business, but give a nod to Liverpool's way of doing transfers, the difference in there is that we had Jurgen Klopp in and we had Michael Edwards in, 2 people who had proven track records in doing what we have done. I don't like to talk about net spend much, but look at the very minimal net spend that we've had and the improvement that Jurgen Klopp has been able to make. And the only reason I bring that up is because United don't know who's in charge there. Is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in charge of transfers? Are they going to bring in a director of football or a sporting director? Does Edwards have a clue what the hell he's doing with regards to transfers? Probably not. Even I think the most staunch United supporter would admit it's been a very scattergun approach. And then the second part and the final part I want to talk about on United is, you touched on Juan Mata's new deal, you touched on Pereira's new deal. Two things that remind me of a situation at Arsenal a while back is, Mesut Ozil knew that he had Arsenal by the short and curlies when it came time to renegotiate his contract. David De Gea, for me, and Marcus Rashford, and I suppose maybe even Martial to an extent, have done very similar things. Like, David De Gea is an excellent goalkeeper. Hasn't had his greatest season, but I'm not going to hold that against the guy. I still rate him very highly. He's one of the best in the world. 350 grand a week, 250 grand a week for Rashford, 250 grand a week for Anthony Martial. Our front three, I believe, are on between 2 and 220.
Well, that's it. I mean, I think what the players that are already there have done is they've capitalised on the clear desperation within Man United to look like it's a steady ship. So, like you correctly pointed out, you know, it's not really clear who's in charge. There's clear instability as regards the management position. We know if they start the season badly, he won't last. You know, it's not as stable a setup as Liverpool's, and therefore, but what they want by signing these new players down to new deals is to appear like, we've got a core, we've got this grip, we're building, we're a force, we're back, etc. and so on. But really, players are smart, or their agents are smart on their behalf, and I think Marcus Rashford might be a slightly different case because he does seem to have a genuine connection to the club because of history. But even with that, it's all there and ripe to be exploited. Nobody really seems to have Liverpool over a barrel. I don't remember there being any kind of real pulling of teeth to get the front three to sign their new deals, etc. and so on. You know, the difference is, I think, with Man United, the players are kind of running the club, whereas at Liverpool it's the reverse. Let's
look at, I think, a very good example that we can talk about here is Divock Origi. He's coming into the last year of his contract with Liverpool, very similar to Marcus Rashford. I'm not sure of the age difference there. I think Origi might be a year or two older.
I think Origi's 25 and Rashford's 21, 22, so 3 years.
Origi that old? Honest to goodness, I thought he was about 23 or 24. I'm always terrible at this stuff. There was a game of Guess the Footballer's Age.
Somebody can correct us, but I'm almost certain it's 25.
So what we're hearing from Liverpool's perspective here is, we want Divock to sign a new deal. It'd be great if he signs a new deal. Whatever happens, he's not going anywhere this summer. He's staying at the club. But there's no talk from Divock Origi's agents about Barcelona and Real Madrid being interested in him wanting 200 grand a week, which we had seen around Rashford. Look, I don't want to spend too long on United, but I think it's fair to say, business-wise, some things remain to be seen. For me, there's one spot left in the top four, and United are going to be challenging for that with Chelsea and Arsenal, and I guess we'll kind of come to a synopsis at the end as to who might get that spot. You touched on City, so let's move on to Manchester City. There's before we get to player transfers here, I want to talk about something that I'd seen tweeted earlier on. So apparently Kloppo's on about 6.5-7 million quid a year, something like that. I'd seen a tweet earlier on from somebody whom I respect that suggested that Pep Guardiola's on 20 million quid a year. He's on £400,000 a week to manage Manchester City. That is a piss take.
Yeah, I mean, the cynic in me says that it's easy to pay the alleged best manager in the world that kind of money when you're peddling financial, fair play, and when you're run by very questionable ownership. That would be the cynic in me. The less cynical, less dominant part of me says that, Pep Guardiola, managers in general, are similar to players in the sense that they have agents. They get their agent to negotiate their worth, and I think with Man City, they know that they are relevant because of who manages them. You take Pep Guardiola out of that setup, and they're just the second biggest team in Manchester. He has made them a globally relevant team because so much of their profile so far, with the buying over Girona and New York City FC and trying to build like a dynasty, so much of that hangs on City. It hangs on how good and how important and how globally prevalent City are, and that is contingent on Pep Guardiola being there and staying there and being happy. If you look at, obviously, when they took over the club, not when they took over the club, but then when Manuel Pellegrini was in charge, he was sacked, and it was prime for Pep Guardiola because the whole structure of the club, the whole, like, I mean, it was the most obvious case of managerial tapping up you've ever seen. God bless, like, Manuel, like, he's such a nice guy in football, but totally just ousted unceremoniously. So with Pep Guardiola, it doesn't surprise me that he earns that much money, because for City, the money is easier for them to pay than to not pay, because the kudos and the credibility that Pep Guardiola brings with him makes it financially worth it for them. Now, what I would say is, does that make it right? No. Does it make it, well, I suppose, does it make it sensible? Probably not, because they haven't won a Champions League, and we all know that's what they want to do. But it does sort of make sense in the context of they need Pep to be relevant.
No, I don't want to seem like I'm trying to do a hatchet job here in Pep Guardiola. As you said, he is one of the best managers in world football. I have immense respect for him as a footballing man, without a shadow of a doubt. I don't want this to sound like I'm just having a go at Pep Guardiola. It's more a dig at these ridiculous wages. But anyway, we'll push on. They activated Rodri's release clause, which I always find interesting, that they have to go to La Liga offices and just basically hand over a cheque for, I think, €70 million in this case was his release clause. You said earlier on that you find that that's basically them filling a glaring weakness, or basically a backup or a future proofing of Fernandinho.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you were to look at City's squad and its vulnerabilities, that replacement / competitor for Fernandinho, and to a lesser extent David Silva, who will be leaving at the end of next season, that's a clear area in their squad where they needed someone long term. They needed someone in their early to mid 20s. Rodri fits the bill in that respect. He, it's remiss to say, but don't underestimate the power of the Spanish compatriotism in terms of, like, the style of football, in terms of him fitting into Pep Guardiola's lineup, if you like, and sort of system. I think the thing that City do well alongside us, and it's not a coincidence that both teams had such a good season last year, but what City do well alongside us is they don't just buy, scattergun approach. Okay, there was that summer where they spent like 100 million on fullbacks, but beyond that, they don't just go out and buy 5-6 players a window. It is a structured it's a structured approach, and I think that's partly why they have success. And Rodri, for me, is a threat in terms of that, because he does fill a place and he does fill something important for them.
I will absolutely agree. They're surgical in the way that they go about finding a weakness and going and filling it. And that's one. Whatever we talk about the money and the FFP and all that stuff, you've got to give them credit for that. If they see a weakness, they feel it, or they go and fill it.
The actual, like, model in terms of building the team is good. The money that funds that model, that's another question. But the actual model is good. I mean, and that's what you do have to applaud. And Pep Guardiola is the architect of that, because they had the money before Pep, but they didn't have the same level of strategical kind of building.
Another area, I suppose, that they are going to be weak in is at centre-back. The loss of Vincent Kompany can't be underplayed. This guy is a natural leader. Okay, his playing time might have been limited because of injuries and age and stuff, but to have him in and around the squad, the dressing room, the training ground, I mean, I've nothing but respect for Vincent Kompany, both as a man and as a footballer. You can talk about the snidey challenge on Salah, but so be it. I think he's one of the good guys at the sport, and again, I tip my hat to him on a great career. I don't want any of this to sound like we're just having a hatchet job against other teams. We're trying to give our honest opinions.
Yeah, sure.
There's a bit of a tug-of-war going on between United and City over Harry Maguire. Now, if United go and get that job done, and to be fair, City sometimes do draw a line where they say, no, we're not going past this number. And I think United are...
Sanchez, and it worked out well for them.
Exactly. And I, to this day, still believe United went and signed him just to stop City signing, because they never looked like they had a plan for him when he came in. Yeah. But have you heard or seen anything linking them to any other centre-backs if they lose out on Harry Maguire?
No, not really, oddly enough. I think there's two possible sort of theories on that. I think the first one is that, well, they're confident they'll get their man, and that they're doing like a Virgil van Dijk type thing of, like, there's one centre back they want and they're going to go for him and that's it. Although obviously we didn't have any competitors for Van Dijk in the same way. I think the second theory is that there's is it Eric Garcia in their academy? They've got a centre back. I think I might have got his first name wrong. His surname is certainly Garcia, and they have high hopes that he will play a role this season. But yeah, those are the two sort of theories if they don't get in terms of Maguire. But I think, like we said before, if it comes down to a footballing decision, the player will choose City, but City may decide, well, we're not going to pay a world record fee for, for Harry Maguire, who, while is a very good centre back, doesn't justify a world record fee, and City know that. So it'll just depend really on what. I mean, Leicester are notoriously very difficult to deal with in terms of sales as well, so that could be a factor. But they do have that pre-existing relationship from the Mahrez sale, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. But even if they get Harry Maguire, that doesn't really fill the void of Vincent Kompany, who I also greatly admire, and I think his challenge on Salah is attributable to the fact that he was aging a lot in that last season. He was just perennially late because he was aging and slower. But I think...
And it wasn't his fault as well that Craig Pawson, was it Pawson who was the referee? Didn't do his damn job, to be fair.
Now that's a clear send-off, and you could see the look on his face, and he knew, and it was... I think by the end, Vincent Kompany almost had this air of invincibility. It was untouchable, in the sense that he was like, I know I'm aging and I know I'm declining, but like, look at me maraud forward and score the winner against Leicester and win us the title. And I admire that. But I think with City, if they were to proceed this season with Otamendi, Mangala's back, he's not been sold yet, so you got Otamendi, Mangala, John Stones, Garcia from the academy, and
Laporte.
And Laporte. I mean, I'd argue out of those five, only really, for me, Laporte and Stones are genuinely above very good. I mean, even Stones is very, very hit and miss still. Makes some very defensive, sort of glaring defensive errors, and I think it will be interesting to see how they proceed with that. But I mean, they played most of the season without an established left back, and they managed to make that work. So I think, unlike Man United, they don't just throw money to find solutions. They throw money to a degree, but then they withdraw if they don't think it makes sense.
We'll push on to Chelsea, and they've announced Frank Lampard as he's coming home. The Manchester City legend that is Frank Lampard is coming home to Chelsea. They have the transfer ban that we all know about. Now, they did get to sign Kovacic because of he was already registered, I think, as a Chelsea player at the time, and there might have been a clause, I don't know, but either way, they got to sign him. They also brought in Christian Pulisic in the last window, was it the January window, and then they stayed for the rest of the season? Anyway, they brought in Christian Pulisic. Can't do much more business. They've sold Eden Hazard. What are you expecting from Chelsea this season?
I mean, the first thing to say is that begrudgingly, I actually think the Frank Lampard move could actually be really good for them. I think it'll force a rethink in terms of... I mean, the transfer ban has made them reconsider how they run the club, and that's not really necessarily a good thing for the rest of the league, because if they had organic success as opposed to totally money adult success, I think they'd be totally unbearable. But I think the Frank Lampard appointment is probably premature, but it's kind of enforced by the circumstances. Frank Lampard is someone who I think was a really good player. He, as likable as I could find any Chelsea player, I put him in that category. I think he's a very diligent, articulate guy.
Extremely intelligent.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why I think he must have been given assurances in terms of his tenure before he signed the deal, because he's not just someone that will just make that decision. I mean, he will pore over the detail. He's intelligent enough to understand it, and I think that does concern me, because this is much more deliberate and forward thinking than we're used to from Chelsea. We're very much used to the appoint, quick success, sack, repeat cycle, and that cycle, well, it may end and it may not end. We'll have to wait and see. I think with Lampard, it's perfect for him in a way, because if it fails and he fails, it's like, well, I was under a transfer ban. But if he has success, it's like the new dawn of the day for Chelsea. But in terms of their 49 youngsters on loan, I think it actually is 49 the last time I checked, only a handful of those have a real chance of actually doing anything, I think, within that team. You'd look at Tammy Abraham, might be given a go, but he's not a striker that I would have at Liverpool, so not a threat. You would look at someone like Callum Hudson-Odoi is a very good player, but still had a very serious injury, has to come back from that. Same with Ruben Loftus-Cheek.
Isn't he running his contract down as well, Hudson-Odoi? Isn't he have 1 year left?
I mean, apparently there's talk that he will now consider signing a new deal, because he will get playing time under Lampard, and I think that is what is a concern. I think if it's always been a running joke that Chelsea have got a whole army out on loan, and they basically hoard players. But the bigger fear for me as a Liverpool fan would be, what if they have a manager who's fearless enough to unleash all these players and they're actually really good? Because no one's ever tried that at Chelsea, so what if it actually worked? So I think that would be a concern. But it's high stakes, isn't it? So, they can't really, blood all these youngsters and then be 16th in the table. And, even Frank Lampard wouldn't get away with that. So it's a high pressure situation. But I only think really of the youngsters that were on loan, only really Tammy Abraham, maybe Tomori that was on loan at Derby might get some minutes. Then you've got, pardon me, who else did they have out on loan? Mason Mount might be in and around the first team. But there are no players out on loan that really make me think, oh my God, they're going to dismantle Liverpool's, position near the top of the table. In terms of their signings, Kovacic hasn't scored a goal since like 2017 or something like that. He's a midfielder, but no one really knows what it is that he's meant to be good at, so it doesn't really interest me. Only signed him because they just had to have bodies. It's like Danny Drinkwater Mark II. And then you've got a situation with Pulisic, who's a very good player. I think he could be excellent, could be really, really good under Frank Lampard in his own right, but whether right or wrong, he will always be looked at against the prism of the gaping hole that is Eden Hazard. So you can sign whoever you want, but he was their one world-class player and he's gone. And I think transition season for Chelsea, and I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't get top 4 this season, and if it didn't matter in terms of his job.
Couple of things for me on Chelsea. Firstly, I've been part of the brigade that have poked fun at them for their short-term thinking at time, but that short-term thinking has brought them success. There's no denying that. They've won titles, they've won cups. So I suppose it's which way you look at that. But with regards to the Eden Hazard situation, I did a video a while back where I said I actually believe Chelsea will benefit in long term from Eden Hazard moving on, because there's an entrenched player power problem at Chelsea Football Club, and it goes back quite a long way to the days of Drogba, Lampard, Terry. It's been there for a while. Many a manager has suffered because of it. Players have, I don't like to say down tools because it's very damning, but I can't think of another phrase, so I'll go with that, and got managers fired. Eden Hazard can be world class when he wants to be. He can destroy teams on his own, but I still think, look at Liverpool as a collective sometimes, and we have stars, but no one person that we could say, if this person's gone, we're screwed. Chelsea,
yeah, no, of course.
I think they'll benefit long term. I think they really, really will from having no Eden Hazard.
The key thing there is long term. I don't think it's going to be an immediate benefit. I think that's the key thing as to what you've said, and you're right. I do think long term, removing one superstar for the benefit of the collective can be a good thing. I mean, what I would say about Hazard particularly is that he had that one season under, the second term of Mourinho where he was a disruptive influence. But outside of that, he seems to be a genuinely relatively good guy, and it seems to have all been left quite amicably. But what I would say with that is it might benefit them in the long term. But you're gonna miss that whole just purely on fear factor alone, Craig. Like whenever Chelsea come to Anfield, every time that Hazard's lined up against us at Anfield, I've always been like, He has that thing where you just know he is capable of absolutely destroying you, and I don't think Chelsea have a player like that now. And I think in terms of pure psychology, it will be better this season. But you're right in terms of success. But what I would say, one quick point on success, because you correctly mentioned that their short-termism has brought success, and I agree, it has. But what I would say is at what cost? Because look at us, for example, our Champions League win couldn't have been done in a more beautiful way. But you look at Chelsea's recent success, the Europa League in Azerbaijan. I mean, quite frankly, no one really gave a shit and everyone knew Sarri was leaving. Look at the Premier League under Antonio Conte, or was it the FA Cup, one or the other, where everyone hated, not everyone, but quite a few of the players hated him, and didn't Willian post a picture with the team celebrating and put an emoji over Conte's face to essentially block him out of the shot. And I'm almost certain that happened, so there was lots of animosity there. I think with Chelsea, despite the success, there never really seems to be true unity. But if they were truly unified under Frank Lampard, that would be a concern, because I think that can carry you quite a long way.
With the Frank Lampard thing, and again going back to Eden Hazard, I suppose I could point to Coutinho. We sold Coutinho at a time where Coutinho was our go-to. If things weren't going well in a game, give the ball to Phil. Do you know what I mean? Phil will make things happen. So I think, Frank Lampard has his hands tied. He can't spend Eden Hazard money. He can't go out and do anything. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens with them. Who else have we got to talk about? Spurs. Let's have a talk about Spurs. Mauricio Pochettino has finally got to play with Daniel Levy's checkbook, and he went out and they signed Dembele from Lyon. One hell of a good footballer, I have to say. An excellent signing. Lyon must be laughing their asses off to an extent as well. They signed him for €8 million the season before after having him on loan. So from a business perspective, that's great. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think Lyon. I mean, that I suppose that's the difference, isn't it? Because you've got the European market, which is in no way comparable with the Premier League market in terms of markup. So you've got the situation where teams in the European market can do really, really well, and then sign a player for relatively cheap from that market, which is not so ridiculous, and then they can sell them to the Premier League at a hugely inflated value. Because, I mean, in the Premier League, the whole perception, correctly, is that, I mean, players, no one really even knows what a player is worth now. Like, I mean, is Ndombele worth 60 million? What did we pay for him? 62 million?
63, something like that. 62, 63, something along those lines.
I mean, there's no sort of strict definition as to what a £63 million player actually looks like anymore. No one really knows. I mean, it's gone so skew-whiff. It's incredibly skewed by the TV money, which has totally corrupted the whole process. But I guess for Spurs, you know, firstly, they actually signed a player, so that's notable. And then secondly, signed two players, Jack Clark as well. And secondly, I think he fills a gaping hole where Moussa Dembele was, where Victor Wanyama isn't really fit to be, where Eric Dyer is kind of boring in. You know, he sort of almost provides the impetus for three different kind of positions within the same midfield in a sense. And I think, if nothing else, it will certainly drive up the standards of the midfielders around him. Because I think with Spurs, if you looked at the Champions League final lineups, you would argue that Liverpool's midfield was very Champions League and Spurs' midfield on the night was very Europa League, and I think therein lay the difference to a point. So what I would say is that he is an excellent player. I mean, we didn't want him, so I'm not especially envious in that respect, but you can't deny that it's a real talismanic signing for Spurs, not least because he probably had the opportunity to go to other clubs in the top six and he chose Spurs. There seems to be an indication that he chose Tottenham over other projects, and you know, that's not something that usually happens for Spurs all the time, so or very rarely. But I think the fact that it is starting to happen is an indication as to their standing in the global game, and that's good for them. But you'd argue their squad needs a lot more sort of additions.
Credit to Spurs. They've built a magnificent, one of the best stadiums I've seen in a very long time. It's gorgeous. It really is. They've gotten to a Champions League final. They've raised their club's profile. They've got a very good young manager in there at the minute who looks like he's not going anywhere at the moment. A couple more things. It looks like they're probably going to lose Christian Eriksen coming into the last year of his contract. They've been looking, though, interestingly. Say again?
Pardon me. I don't think they'll be that bothered by that. I think Christian Eriksen was totally anonymous in the Champions League final. I think he's got patches of anonymity in him. Somebody pointed out on another podcast I listened to a few months ago that he is, I believe, 27, but probably has the legs of a 30-year-old in respect of the number of games he's played.
28 now. I think he's 28 now.
Sorry. So, I mean, he's probably slightly older than that in terms of the number of games. I think if you're to sell him, do it now. And I think there's been rumours in the media that Daniel Levy's been actively trying to, you know, prompt and provoke a sale. So, I mean, he's a very, very good player, but if he's not going to sign the deal, I don't think they're going to be that bothered. And truth be told, and we all know, you know, Daniel Levy is one of the most shrewd and nefarious kind of men in the business, and it wouldn't surprise me if Ndombele was brought in because there is some kind of understanding and principle that, you know, Christian Eriksen will go.
Oh, I don't doubt that for 1 second. One thing I read interestingly about an hour ago was Spurs had been linked along with Liverpool and a couple of other clubs to Dani Ceballos from Real Madrid, and apparently Mauricio Pochettino is willing to make a personal phone call, a personal plea to Dani Ceballos to try and get him to Spurs. Another thing about this that's interesting is Real Madrid apparently willing to do business around £45 million, but they're insisting on a buyback clause. And we know Madrid are famous for these type of clauses. They've done it numerous times. Can a club like Spurs, Liverpool, realistically wanting to build a long-term squad bow down to that? I mean, is it worth maybe getting a few quid off a player if you don't have the stability of knowing you have this player for 3, 4, 5 years, that Real Madrid can come in next year and go, do you know what, we've had a good year, let's go and get Dani Ceballos back?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, actually. I suppose in terms of if it's the one thing that's going to secure the signature of this player you really want, then, you know, possibly you would relent and put in the buyback clause. But then if you look at it purely from the point of view of how your club looks and how you look in terms of your order in the food chain, it doesn't look good. It looks very much like you're like, okay, Real Madrid, thank you. We'll keep your player, but if you want him back, you can have him back whenever you want. You know, it's a little bit of an admission as to the fact that Madrid are a bigger club than Spurs, which of course everyone knows. But I think if it's there in black and white, it almost seems like it's just a slightly more sophisticated loan in a way, because it's like, well, you know, you are there on a permanent, but we've got this buyback clause, and we know that if you produce what we think you can produce, then we will exercise it. And, you know, also I think it's a bit of an insult to the player. I mean, if you think he's that great and you want to put in a buyback clause, you know, blood him in your team. Real Madrid finished 4th in La Liga last season. We're absolute dog shit. And I think, you know, if you are being honest, they have obviously strengthened significantly, but they, to my mind, they haven't actually brought in anyone in the central midfield area. Isn't that is where Ceballos plays? Am I right in thinking that?
Yes, and they're looking at selling Toni Kroos as well, apparently.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I mean, and obviously, you know, Modric isn't getting any younger either. So, you know, if you really are invested in this player and his future, blood him this year. Tell Zidane to play him. So yeah, I agree with you. Actually, I think because of the specific nature of the circumstances with the player, and also the fact that Spurs don't want to look like, you know, anybody's whipping boy, I would say, well, we want him, but no buyback clause. Go away.
And the last club really quickly to go through, who looks like they're doing very little business, is Arsenal, of course, linked to Kieran Tierney, linked to Nabil Fekir, linked to Wilfried Zaha as well, which quite frankly does not look like there's no way they can afford to buy him though. Like 40 million, that's a fuck off bid really for Wilfried Zaha, especially when the rumour is that they want 60 because United have a 25% sell-on clause or something like that, or they want 80, excuse me. United have a 25% sell-on clause, which would give Crystal Palace 60. Arsenal, quite frankly, Cash, understand Kroenke not making the Champions League this season. It's no secret that their budget seems to be 40 million.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's a couple of interesting points on this. The first one is that Arsenal are so fucking badly run. Like, I mean, if you even look at the fact that you've made a derisory bid to a club that's just sold their academy grown right back for £50 million and therefore doesn't need the money. You've made like a derisory bid that's not going to tempt them into their talismanic winger, who means so much more than just a squad number at Palace, who essentially, I wouldn't say single-handedly, but him and Milivojevic essentially keep Palace in the Premier League, or have done for the last 2 seasons. You throw in a £40 million bid for Zaha. I mean, that's it's sort of up there with the what are they smoking over here at the Emirates kind of thing, in the sense that that's just stupid. I mean, it just doesn't really make any sense for me, because you know that they've got the Wan-Bissaka money and they don't need to sell. And also, Zaha's on a very, very lucrative and recently signed long-term contract, so there's no sort of wiggle room there. And also, I mean, there's the other couple of points, is that firstly, I mean, does that even really address the big weaknesses in Arsenal's squad? If you're going to throw 70 million at a player, make it 2 centre-backs. I mean, Arsenal's centre-back situation is absolutely dire. I mean, you've got Socrates, who did reasonably well, but outside of that, Rob Holding, long-term injury. You've got, Mustafi, who's like a walking absolute like car crash. And then obviously you've got an aging Koscielny. So if you want to throw 70 million at someone, make it 2 centre-backs or one really good one. So for me, it doesn't even really solve their problems. And then also, the fact of the matter is that I've totally lost my train of thought there. Basically, Arsenal are badly run and they need to like sort out their lives. If they actually manage to hold on to their players and sell them for value as opposed to letting them go on free transfers all the time, then maybe they'd have more money to play with.
Right, so to finish up on this, because there's one more little topic we want to talk about before we finish up on the stream. For me, Spurs, Liverpool, City are taking 3 of the top 4 places. There's one up for grabs. Who do you think might take that place?
I actually think it'll... Oh, shit, I don't know. You know what I actually think? I'm going to give a sort of a convoluted answer. If Man United, as I think they will, sack Ole Gunnar Solskjaer early in the season, I think they'll get it. If they don't, I think it'll be Chelsea. Right,
so to finish up there, we've talked about the business other clubs are doing. We've predicted our top 4. There is one more subject we want to finish up on today, and there was some really good news came out of the club the other day. So we know the club are on this fantastic pre-season tour of America, But for the first time, Cash, the club have come out and the club have put out a statement to say that great news, the Liverpool ladies team are also going to be joining their male compatriots over here for a pre-season tour. And you know what? Before I come across to you for your probably much more in-depth thoughts on this than my own, I think whatever inspires people to play the game, to fall in love with the club, is good with me. I want people around the world to be inspired. I want young ladies, young boys, whatever, to be inspired to kick a football, to buy that Liverpool shirt, to watch our club. And if we can do this as a combined effort between the male, the female counterparts, brilliant. I'm all for it. I think it's a great move.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think there are some cynics who will say, "Oh, you're just doing it for commercial reasons. You're doing it because, as we talked about before we went on air, Liverpool have a main family partner that they, who have a very sort of like wholesome image, and they want to curry favour in terms of how the club looks from an outsider's perspective." And also, cynics will say you're doing this to engender goodwill because the Women's World Cup has actually been, well, more popular than ever, really. I mean, if you're looking at viewing figures as an indication. So I guess there are cynics that will say that, but what I would say in response to that is you can only be a part of the change. You can't question every decision that a club makes. So with Liverpool, for example, maybe there's an element of this is good PR, but I also genuinely believe there's a concerted effort from within the club to bring the ladies closer to the men's. Yes, in terms of earning potential, we know that the disparity is wide. It will always be wide. The commercial revenue just isn't there. That is, in my opinion, wrong, but is that something that will change overnight? Absolutely not. But what can change overnight is a club deciding, you know what, we're going on this tour and we've got a bit more space on our plane. Let's bring the women. And I think that sends out a really strong message, a really important message in terms of progression, so that other clubs may follow suit and start to match up their ladies teams with their male teams in terms of the pre-season plans. And secondly, it will also show that there's a recognition from within the club that the women's game is important and it matters, and that acknowledgement by way of having the women on the tour is so fundamentally important, because you know what, if Liverpool Football Club share an opinion, if they say and if they show that they believe women's football matters, people will follow suit because people follow Liverpool Football Club like a religion. So if Liverpool Football Club says that you should watch ladies football, guess what, more people will watch it. And I think it very much ties into this idea that you should try and marry up your female teams with your male teams. And I've been watching the Women's World Cup, and you've got like Spurs, for example, and Man United, both their women's teams are coming into the WSL next season. Then you've got Man City are already a very good team in that league, as are Arsenal, as are Chelsea. So it's got a very Premier League feel. So if you take these global clubs in terms of the male teams and you try and sort of fortify that link with the women's teams, that will assume a greater level of importance, and then people will be inspired by virtue of that, because, sorry to tie it up, because by virtue of that, young girls will think, well, I can play this game and maybe one day I can be really important. And, I think that a lot of the time that's what people really want in their lives. And I think it's a really, really good move that just happens to be good PR. But I'd like to believe, and I do believe, that it actually is the genuine good intention of the club. And it's really positive.
Absolutely. And a couple of things there. Those who are cynics and believe it's a PR commercial move, it's a fucking pre-season tour. The whole thing is one big commercial move from start to finish by the club, male and female. It doesn't make any difference. It's all about raising awareness of the club, bringing in potential sponsorship deals. And let's not forget, these ladies are going over with the male team to a country that pretty much set the standard for female football. And the level of professionalism and coaching and the collegiate structure and stuff that's in place. I mean, America are doing a pretty damn good job there.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I would certainly say that American people are doing a good job. What I would argue is that the American the American FA or whatever the equivalent is are not doing a very good job, because the women's team, who in America are much more high profile than the men's team, they're actually suing for sex discrimination because they don't get paid the same as their male counterparts for their participation in the World Cup. So they are trailblazing that gender equality that they really believe they deserve by virtue of the fact that they're on par with their male counterparts over there. I think obviously with us and with our women's team, it's different. But all you can do is take small steps in the hope of aiding the overall progression toward true equality. And as you said, you're going to a country where fans are going to eat that up, because they're going to be like, well, our women are brilliant at football. Your women are going to be great at football. Let's all be great at football. And I think it feeds into a very circular mentality.
Perfect. I think, look, we've run out of time. One little point on the Women's World Cup I'd like to make is, and this isn't, how am I going to phrase this? I've been very impressed with the level of officiating. And I mean that as in, I've watched the African Cup of Nations and there's been some dog shit refereeing going on there. And I've watched the Women's World Cup and I have seen a very high calibre, very high standard of officiating. And that's good. I mean, more of this training of referees around the world, please. I mean, male, female, it doesn't matter. We all just want better officials. And I've been very impressed with the standard of officiating at this Women's World Cup.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's made it to be a better spectacle as well, obviously, as it would.
And one more point, actually, I want to get your take on this. Sometimes I feel with male referees, when a player confronts them or stands up to them, it's almost the male bravado that makes them book them. Sometimes it's in the how dare you come up into my face, whereas from my very basic watching of the female game, I've seen the women referees seem to be more willing to have a chat and describe why they're pissed off or why they believe that this foul should have happened. And I genuinely, as a male, I can appreciate that, because I would probably book somebody who was up in my face if I felt like he was encroaching on my male ego.
Yeah, no, I mean, I suppose I don't think that necessarily makes it correct, though, and I think you're right to make that point. What I would say is that, you know, people would say, well, you know, it's just two males fueled with testosterone, you know, facing off, and, you know, women are more measured because they're not as driven by that. But I also think particularly if you're a referee and if you're a player, you do have that degree of, you know, you've played the game a long time, you've been involved in the game a long time. You don't necessarily need to be that combative. You don't need to be adversarial. You can take a step back and consider things before kicking off left, right, and centre. I mean, that is something that they are trying to eradicate from the game, is that barraging of referees. And I suppose from the referee's perspective, I can kind of understand it. I mean, I'm not in a Mike Dean booking, brandishing kind of way, but I do understand the idea that if you're managing 22 sort of extremely well paid, extremely potentially egotistical athletes, if they do sort of get into your space, if they do sort of cross the line, and you have the power to punish them for doing that, I think it would take a very strong person not to just be like, well, you know what, I'm in control, you know, yellow card, red card, whatever. So I think it is interesting. But what I would say, and what I would agree, is that it's so important that referees, players, male, female, whatever, are as measured as possible, really, because it makes the game better.
I just want the game to grow around the world. I don't care if it's male football, female football. I just want kids to fall in love with the sport. I want them to play it. I want more grassroots money involved. I want better coaching, and I just want people to love what is the beautiful sport. It's called the beautiful sport for a reason, because it brings people together, crosses religious, every boundary possible.
It's a global game, and I think, you know, only people that are, you know, truly threatened by the idea of progress wouldn't want that, you know. So everyone that I speak to, you know, advocate growth of the women's game, they advocate the growth of the men's game, the evolution of both. And like you say, there's no negative to be drawn from inspiring people of both genders to fall in love and enjoy a game that has brought us all so much joy. And I just don't think there can be any negative for that. And if there is, then obviously those people are not very happy.
Right, we're going to leave it there. As always, thank you so much to Cash for coming on for a chat. No doubt I'll have her on again very soon, probably for a podcast. To everyone that's watching, thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this stream. If there's anything you want to comment on, you know where to put it in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a thumbs up as well. And we'll be back very soon. Up the motherfucking Reds.